And we'll start with a quick round of introductions. We have some guests today, so if you'd be so kind as not only tell the government you represent, but also the position you hold, position and the government you represent. So, Commissioner Littleton.
You, Peggy Littleton, El Paso County. Commissioner, sorry.
Andy Gunning with PPACG.
Dennis Carpenter, Mayor Rama. I'm filling in for Turner Smith today. He's under the weather.
Mark Waller, El Paso County Commissioner and Secretary.
Stan Vanderwerf, El Paso County Commissioner.
Karen Rose, CDOT Region 2 Director.
Michael Lewis, Executive Director at CDOT.
Dick Elsner, Park County Commissioner.
Jake Middleton, Vice Wing Commander, 50th Space Wing, Schriever.
Johnny said 21st Space Wing, Peterson Air Force Base.
Good morning, Pat Carley, 10th Air Base Wing Vice Commander at Air Force Academy.
Good morning, Rod Chisholm, Deputy Garrison Commander at Fort Carson.
Good morning, Tyler Stevens, Green Mountain Falls, Trustee.
Ken Geray, Mayor of Manitou Springs.
Andy Pico, Colorado Springs City Council and Vice Director, Colorado Springs Utilities.
Buenos dias, Yolanda Avila, City Council, Colorado Springs.
Sharon Thompson, Fountain City Council Treasurer.
Neil Levy, Mayor, Woodland Park.
Jill Gabler, Colorado Springs City Council.
And good morning again. I'm Norm Steen, Teller County Commissioner and your chair. We'll begin with public comments this morning. First up, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Michael Lewis. Michael is the Executive Director of CDOT. He is here on his own request, and really appreciate all the work we've done with Director Lewis over the year or so. Congratulations to your appointment of Director, following behind Shailen Batt. We're going to open with a presentation by Mr. Lewis, and Mike, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Norm. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me down here. I've been at CDOT for about 3 years, and during that time as the Chief Operating Officer, I have been attending the STAC meetings because I think it is so important that CDOT is engaged with all of the transportation planning regions and the MPOs in a way that we share information. We know what the challenges are in each of the local areas, and it's not a top-down decision-making process. It's very much a bottoms-up. So I've been involved. I've appreciated Norm's attendance at STAC, and Andy, your attendance as well. And when I became Executive Director last year at STAC, I said I would love to go to meet with any TPR or MPO that was interested in sitting down with me, and because I learn more about what your specific issues are in your local region, because that's just going to help us collectively make better decisions. So that's why I'm here. I think, Norm, quickly, I think when I said that, you texted immediately to say, sign us up.
Before you, at the end of the sentence, I think I was already contacting someone back here to get you on our schedule. So
right. So very glad to be here. Obviously, I don't have a presentation per se. I'd much rather have a dialogue. We've been working. I've worked with some of you recently on a non-controversial little transportation initiative on I-25, and I'd be glad to talk about that today. But I also think that this is, from a transportation perspective, when I make a presentation to the public or to any group, which I have to do fairly frequently, is I try to point out that, and this goes back a long, long time, transportation departments exist, in my mind, for two reasons. One is to support and promote the economic vitality of whatever jurisdiction you're in, whether it's a town, county, city, state, country. That's the primary reason for a transportation system and a transportation department. The second is to support the quality of life of the people that live there, because without, one of the great benefits of being an admitted carpetbagger to Colorado, come here for the quality of life, and many people that are, whether you're native or you've come here, it's because of the quality of life that Colorado provides. And if your transportation system is taking away from that quality of life, that's a negative. So those are the two reasons in my mind that we exist: support the economic interests of the region and support the quality of life of the people that live here. I'm very encouraged that transportation is, an investment in transportation is on the front burner, both at the State House and I think around the state. in many localities and many individuals, when polling is done of what's the number one, and this is not unanimous, but when polling is done, and has been done recently, on what are the top issues facing Colorado, transportation investment comes in as the number one issue. And I think that's both good and bad. On the bad side, it means that we have a problem. We have a challenge, and people recognize we have a challenge. And it's a challenge around growth. It's a challenge around prioritization. It's a challenge around condition. But it means that maybe there is a will to do something about it for the betterment of the state. So whatever comes out of the legislature this year, and it is a daily discussion point, and some of the folks at the table are closely tied to that discussion. Whether there is a ballot initiative in the fall or not, it doesn't mean that the issue goes away. If it's not addressed, the issue is still there in front of us, and it gets more and more difficult as each year goes by. But I'm encouraged. I think the planets are starting to come into alignment, that there is a belief that investing more in transportation is for the benefit of the economy of Colorado and all of Colorado, and the quality of life of the people who live here. So we'll see how that plays out. I think it's very important that CDOT as an entity delivers on the promises it makes and is run efficiently. That the projects like the Cimarron project here in the Springs are successful, and those are the kinds of successes that we need to ensure continue to happen. Otherwise, probably don't deserve the trust of the people of Colorado, and that's what we're focused on. But I think it's very important that the prioritization of investment in transportation is coming from a local perspective, and I think that's why PPACG, Dr. Cog, the TPRs are prioritizing what their interests are. There's a broader state interest. I think it's important that we don't become a state of islands of prosperity, but there's a statewide system, and there's a reason that there's an overall state plan to connect these localities, but a lot of the improvements need to become from the state, from the locals, and not from the state. So I think that's why I'm here, Norm, to hear from all of you what your priorities are. Karen, the District 2 region, we're very fortunate to have Karen as our regional director. Virtually all of the work that is done in the state, actually all of the work that's done in the state, is done through the regional offices. So the relationship between the communities, the counties, the MPOs, and the TPRs, it's very important that our regional directors and their staff have a good working relationship and open communication on issues that we're all on board with and issues that are contentious. It's really important that we have and maintain a good working relationship and open and candid communication so that we can adjust where we need to adjust collectively. And so my thanks to Karen and her team. Some of her team is here, and your willingness to maintain that open communication, even when we have to have tough, difficult discussions.
So maybe we can open for questions, and if, Mike, you don't mind, I'll just let people direct the questions directly to you and let you manage the conversation. Stan, let's just start off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I appreciate very much your being down here. That's awesome. To me, it's a demonstration of your willingness to be engaged, and I've seen you down here many times. Appreciate that. And despite our challenges and perhaps differences of opinion with regard to I-25, I have enjoyed very much working with CDOT. I've enjoyed very much working with Karen, your Region 2 director, and her team. So I just want you to know that I think we got a great relationship. We just have our differences and challenges, and it's just all professional. I do have some general comments and some questions. You know, we've heard it's basically two. The first one is we've heard recently about an enormous amount of potential growth, which we certainly have seen the last few years and probably is going to continue. That's going to really add a lot of pressure to the CDOT-managed roads here in the Colorado Springs region. We still don't have a half-circle a limited access highway around the eastern part of the city. We don't have any east-west thoroughfares. Not sure if that was my mic or not. And then we have Highway 24 west of 25 going to Manitou Springs, which is a very difficult.
Anyone's cell phones are near the microphone, stick them in your pocket.
I don't know if it's mine or not, but they're out of the way now. And that's a very difficult area, and really backs up big time during commuting hours, both in the morning and the evening. And then, of course, it's a really heavily traveled road during tourist season. So I think we need to have a broader discussion about kind of strategic approach to the infrastructure in the Colorado Springs area on CDOT highways, because we've got, if we're going to increase in this rate of population, and we have road challenges now, we really need to be thinking now to be anticipating those issues. And then the one last, that's one question. I'm interested in your comment on that. The other one is with the closure of the Cog Railway, we're going to have an enormous issue on Highway 24. Even with the Cog Railway handling 300,000 visitors a year, we would have the left turn lane going onto Cascade Road to get up the Pikes Peak Highway, backing up several miles down to Cave of the Winds, which is all the way down Ute Pass on certain days, not every day, but on certain days. With the closure of the Cog Railway, we have we're going to have a really huge issue this summer with an even larger backup. And this impacts people to even get through the highway, because a lot of people realize they should have been in the left turn lane and stop in the right turn lane to move left and actually completely stop traffic on Highway 24 going west. And there's two issues there. One of them is the gate for the city that needs to be worked to increase the speed, the throughput of that gate. And the second one is that left turn lane, and just generally actually the Cascade Highway 24 intersection, which is once again like a 1960s design or something like that, and really is suffering from an obsolete design. So those are my two questions, the general one and then the Ute Pass one. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. So, agree, but I'll lengthen the answer beyond that. One of the challenges, as you point out, every locality, every municipality, every county has very well-known identified needs, because you deal with them. You deal with them every day. These are the frustrations that you deal with. This is where you see the growth coming, and this is that improvements need to be made in these areas, and that is true across the state. So there is a list of projects, identified known projects, that at this point is probably on the north side of $10 billion. These are unfunded priority projects, and the ones that you mentioned, Commissioner, are probably on that list, but some of them may not even be on the $10 billion list. And working with all of the STAC members over the course of the last probably 8 or 9 months at CDOT is in anticipation of a potential ballot initiative. I know that's a very controversial measure, but in anticipation of a potential ballot measure, we collectively came up with a reduced list of about a little more than $6 billion. That if $6 billion were available, wherever it came from, the sky, the trees, the feds, the state, wherever it came from, that these are the priority projects that we could do in probably get them out there and advertised, depending on competition in the industry, but within a 5-year span, built out within a 10-year span. That's the vision we're looking at. So things like Boulevard, obviously the I-25 improvements are on that list, and the region, working with all of you, have identified, what would those top priority projects in the PPACG area be? And it's not the full list. It's not the full, even at $6 billion plus, that doesn't get to the full list of improvements that you've identified. So and then that's true in every region. So if $6 billion comes, we can make a big step forward for this state for the next decade on needed improvements. It's not going to solve the problem forever. We all know that. The problem will never be solved because there will always be change, there will always be growth. but it would really push us forward. Now, if it's not $6 billion, what if the money falls from the trees, but it's been a bad harvest year, and it's not 6, it's less than that. Maybe it's half of that. Then it's another tough discussion we have around the state and each region. How do we further curtail that list of priority projects down lower? And there'll be some really tough but robust discussions around what becomes the priority. But even if it's less than that, it's still good. It's a step forward. It's improvements that are necessary for, again, that economic vitality and the quality of life, and we can make progress. And then we need to keep together working on finding solutions. With regard to the Route 24 and the Cog Railway, I mean, Karen's much closer to it than I am. I'm familiar with it. I can perceive the problem you're identifying because of that. And I don't know, Karen, if you can comment on specific actions we could take.
Yeah, just overall, we're starting our statewide planning process, and I know talking to Director Gunning, they're talking about how to do scoring, and you guys are coming up again. So again, we have a big long-term picture, right, of here's what our transportation system will be in 25 years. But things change, right? We didn't expect the Cog Railway to shut down, so then we didn't expect so many people to come to Schriever, for that to expand. So you have to also be flexible to those changing demands is what I would say. But, right now, mainly the funding we have maintains our existing system. We do have money identified to look at the intersection of Pikes Peak, so we've been working with the city and the county and CDOT. We know what drainage improvements we need to get done there. I think the city set aside $100,000 that they're working with the consultant to help look at a design at that intersection. But now, again, those traffic projections are probably just blown out of the water. So right now on the ballot measure, we have $25 million for 24 West. So that's the money we have to make capital improvements at this time. But we can always look at that design and see if there's minimal cost for improvements that could be made there. So we are looking at that. There is a paving project that's anticipated either next summer or the summer after for 24. We always try to combine other improvements in there. So that's definitely one for a partnership to meet with and figure out what solutions can we come up short-term and long-term for that intersection.
Mike, maybe from your perspective, the funding outlook. We talked briefly about the different permutations that can happen on funding in the short and long term. How does CDOT address the challenges you've got on long-term funding?
First of all, it's trying to picture the myriad of possible outcomes that could come from this discussion. So we actually, I didn't bring it today, but we actually tried to compare these possible outcomes in a histogram because I'm a very visual learner and I need to draw pictures and see pictures to see what these outcomes are. So the base case, we all know that what passed last year was Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 267, Freudian slip there. So Senate Bill 267 provided $1.8 billion in borrowing capacity for projects, and we've worked closely with through the STAC, the State Transportation Advisory Council, and all the MPOs to identify what are the priority projects for Senate Bill 267, which is about, again, 20% of the identified needs around the state. The GAP I-25 project is one of those projects on that list. I-25 north of Denver is on that list. There are other projects around the state that are on that list. So if the base case holds and nothing comes out, no changes come out of the legislature this year, and there's no ballot measure, then Senate Bill 267 is in place. The Commission has identified projects for the first 2 years of funding, which would be $380 million in year one, $500 million in year two. The third and fourth years would be $500 million each. So we have identified those projects that could be funded. So that's the base case. If Senate Bill 1 or some variant of Senate Bill 1 were to pass, there is a possibility that only the first year of Senate Bill 267 funding is retained, the $380 million, and that the subsequent years would be subsumed within another funding source. And that may be additional general funds to transportation, which is great, depending on how much, depending on how much goes to CDOT versus locals and counties. That's a big variable in that decision. And also the thing that we need to remember is that what the legislature giveth, the legislature can taketh away. And there's history of that. So I don't mean that, that's reality. We all know that's reality. So it's being provided general funds without authority to bond against the general funds it becomes a pay-as-you-go, and then you don't get the advantage of being able to upfront funds to do projects early. So that's a variable. Now, if on the other end of the spectrum, if a Senate Bill 1 passes, and there are general funds that go to transportation, whatever that split is, if the first year of Senate Bill 267 is still in play, if the talk about 500 roughly million of a one-time transfer for next year is still in play, if a ballot initiative passes in the fall, then things are very good, because then we can do that list of projects. We can put more money into asset management and maintenance. We can go deeper down into the list of priority projects, and that's a very good outcome for transportation. I am not a gambler. I do not make predictions, so I'm not going to say whether that's likely or not. But those are the two ends. The status quo is 267. A change that would trade out what 267 provides for some other general funds is somewhere that's possible. And then the far end of the spectrum is general fund plus revenue, new revenue that we could actually borrow against.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mike, thanks for being here and giving the update. I appreciate it. I understand there's a new little wrinkle with 267 now, in that there's a Tabor lawsuit challenging the bill. So my question is, and I know that it's not set for any action until October of this year, and so I got a call from the Treasurer's Office, the State Treasurer's Office, saying they're going to hold off on allocating 267 funds for now. So does CDOT have enough of a fund balance in order to go forward with projects that we were going to be going forward on, or is everything that was identified with the 267 money just going to be on hold until that lawsuit's resolved?
That's a great question, Commissioner, and I learned of this about 48 hours ago, or maybe 24 hours ago, that there was a wrinkle in the 267. So the issue is there is apparently a lawsuit filed against the state, the Treasurer's Office, on the validity of 267. Not so much on the transportation piece of it, but on broader issues.
The single subject rule,
Right.
they say it violated that. I feel very confident we're going to win.
And so that's good. I like confidence. And so we've been in contact with the Treasurer's Office, because the short answer to your question is no, there is no money to replace the 267 money. What we're trying to do, our staff has been working with the Deputy Treasurer, I think this is fair to say, on how to get the 267 money available at the earliest possible date. And the earliest possible date is July 1 of this year. Because if that money or portions of that money is made available, then we can go out. We have a plan to go out, as you all know, with projects like the I-25 improvement project here, between here and Denver, projects like the I-25 improvements north of the city, projects like the I-70 managed lane, westbound managed lane. So we have a strategy to do that. Oh, and there are some significant projects in the southwest part of the state that were grant recipients and that are important. So we could do that if that money is available, and it doesn't all come at once. We can do we've targeted it. So our schedule is predicated upon that money coming to us. What we just learned, as you said, is that with this lawsuit, the Treasurer's Office is hesitant to issue any bonds until that litigation is resolved. And I would say that I'm not a lawyer, nor am I the Treasurer, but that could be a never-ending cycle. Because if the hearing was delayed till October, that means the judge's decision could be delayed until the first part of next year, and then there could be an appeal. So that is a very open-ended, process. And I think that what we would like to do, and again, I'm not the treasurer. I'm not the treasurer's office. I'm not the treasurer's attorneys. But we would like, and we will be communicating with them, is there a path forward that isn't as conservative?
And I think one of the reasons to bring that issue up in front of this board is I think that there's potential for us to weigh in here and file some sort of brief with the court to say, look, we're going to be irreparably harmed if this case isn't dismissed before October. Because I think ultimately that's what happens. I think that the case is going to be dismissed, but the plaintiffs' attorneys fired the plaintiffs because they're difficult people to work with, and so the judge has granted continuances that have pushed this date out until October. And I think if enough, groups here, local governments like the county, the city, folks like that, file briefs on behalf of the treasurer's office and say, look, we're going to be irreparably harmed if this doesn't happen. I'm hopeful that maybe that helps us speed this process up and get that case dismissed sooner rather than later.
So I appreciate that, and I think I would offer anything that you can do in that regard is a good thing. Any discussions you can have, if you have connections with the treasurer's office, that's a good thing. But again, ultimately, that's going to be the treasurer's call.
And I think for us to be able to do that, we had to be to the understanding that there is no fund balance to prevent this irreparable harm from happening.
That is correct.
Okay.
Other questions for Director? Oh, sorry. Peg?
So, Michael, thank you for coming down. Peggy Littleton, El Paso County Commissioner. While my colleagues, I think, have been up personally speaking with you in Denver, this is the first time that we've had you down here to actually speak in front of this group. Karen, of course, is a wonderful representative down here. I would be remiss if I didn't, while you were here in front of all of the other colleagues, just remind you, and I appreciate your fact that you look at CDOT and transportation, looking at economic vitality, quality of life. One of the things that really hit me is delivering on the promises so that we deserve the trust of the constituents. And I know down here we put a couple of ballot measures on, one from PPRTA, one from the county, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to deliver and to keep the trust of the voters down here who fully intended to have the gap lane be not a managed lane in any way, shape, or form. And I know you know that. I know you've heard that message loud and clear from down here. But I certainly just wanted to reiterate that today, especially when some of my colleagues and I, were out in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago and were able to hear. Thankfully, we were one of two states chosen. It was Arizona and Colorado for commissioners, and we had no less than 30 commissioners in getting briefings in the EEOB from all of the undersecretaries out there. And the Department of the Interior was very clear when I asked the question, is it a requirement to have a consideration of or require a toll or a managed lane for an infra grant? And the answer was just simply no, not at all. So we were glad to hear that, and we would like to continue to work with you in any way, shape, or form to have, that third lane not be a managed lane right now, to put in a fourth lane, from Fort Collins down to Pueblo, at some point in time when we need one, that it will all be tolled on that fourth lane, the whole stretch, rather than just penalizing our area and going, once you get to Castle Rock, there's no toll. So we would love to continue to work with you if that means another, 6 feet on the left and 6 feet on the right and restriping to put in a fourth lane for now. I think that the citizens would be extremely appreciative because we're trying to keep our trust with our citizens as well. So thank you so much for coming down again. And I did want to reiterate that.
No, and I appreciate that, Commissioner. I'm well versed in the controversy that this has created. Part of the And I'm the buck stops with me. All right, so it is my responsibility. One of the reasons one of the causes of getting into this controversy is that in an effort to accelerate this project, and get it done more quickly, which I know there was a lot of interest in doing that, is that the ongoing planning and environmental study for the whole corridor from the Springs to C470, which takes into consideration long-term improvements, was going to take longer. I know there have been discussions publicly about it could be 10 years away before we have any improvements there, and I think I wasn't happy with that, and nor were a number of elected officials happy with that. And so we made a commitment. There has got to be something we can do in the short term to make the major improvement that is needed for both safety and capacity, and so we accelerated that. We accelerated it, I think, beyond anything that CDOT has done before, working with all of you. But what we did in doing that, we still have to follow the National Environmental Policy Act procedures in order to get an environmental approval from the Federal Highway Administration. So there's a series of, public meetings, processes, reviews that have to be done. And I think it forced us to get ahead of the public discussion on tolls, no tolls. And I take responsibility for that. And this may not be, I've had a number of discussions with other commissioners, and I know this is not well received, but we believe at CDOT, and the commission specifically, that in order to manage traffic until there's a revenue stream that is secure enough that we can do that list of projects that we all have identified, that managing growth is important, because if we do just keep building highway lane capacity, it will fill up, because the growth is coming. And the evidence of that is, what we use is the I-25 through the center of the city after T-Rex. It's basically, it's filled up now. And there is no opportunity to maintain travel time reliability. So we are applying a managed lane approach on capacity improvements in the metro areas, and that's true of US 36, it's true of I-70, it's true of the Central 70 project, it's true of I-25 North from here to Fort Collins, and it's true of this section as well. And I know that has caused a lot of local consternation, and a lot of very creative thinking coming from some folks at this table about how can it be done differently. I think there are some. First of all, there are some reasons why it's federal statute that if you cannot turn an existing free facility into a toll facility, so we couldn't say let's toll it later without building a future new lane. One of the things we're being very careful about and thoughtful about is because the PEL study for the whole corridor is ongoing, it's still ongoing, is that we want to make sure, and the belief is, under current technology, is that there will come a day when that corridor needs to be 4 lanes in each direction. That anything that we're doing, anything that we're building will accommodate future expansion. We're not doing the 4 lanes now because A, we don't see that it is needed now. We're not saying it won't be needed in the future. That to short circuit the time required to get improvements now is that if we do that 3 lanes now, we don't need additional right-of-way. We can do it within the existing footprint that the state owns, and that shortens the environmental review process. So that was the driving factor of getting the improvements needed now. We're also looking at, are there opportunities to make part of that cross-section 4 lanes, whether it's truck climbing lanes or where it can be accommodated within the existing footprint to help the capacity. But I just want to be very clear. The environmental impact, the environmental assessment that's going to be finalized later this month, we will be going out as the preferred alternative. Would be inclusive of a managed lane. The 3rd lane would be a managed lane. So I just want to be very clear. That's the way we're going to go out. There'll be public hearings, but that doesn't preclude improvements that include a 4th lane, and it certainly doesn't eliminate the need to make further improvements on the corridor, both north and south of the gap section, because as the growth comes, there will be needed improvements. This is not the end of the improvements that are needed on the I-25 corridor.
Well, I'm going to still continue to push you to consider other alternatives.
As will others.
I understand that. I mean, if we don't need a fourth lane right now that's a lane at all, then make this one a free lane. You know, because it's extremely unfair that the citizens here get double taxed, you know, moving forwards. And once they get up to Castle Rock, there's no lane that's a managed lane. So it's not needed there, it's not needed here to get us up to that point at this point in time is my question. So I appreciate you listening. The truth is that, you know, El Paso County is the most populous county in the state of Colorado. And while you don't necessarily need our vote for a ballot issue, I will tell you that if this goes in as a managed lane, you will not have the vote of the citizens to do any transportation funding going forward. You will have lost that trust.
It's a very important consideration. I appreciate that comment.
Thank you. You said something in that discussion here that kind of piqued my interest. One of the things that we mentioned over a year ago was that as the infrastructure goes in for the expansion of I-25, that CDOT should be planning for that fourth lane. So when you build culverts and infrastructure and bridges and so forth, that you size it so that whenever you do come in the following month, that you don't have to go rebuild those structures. So I'm not sure I heard that as you were talking about
Yeah,
that.
that is absolutely the case, Andy. That is any bridge structure that crosses the alignment, or any culvert or wildlife crossing that is going under the alignment would be built under a four-lane cross-section. It would be built to accommodate a four-lane cross-section.
Thank you very much.
Other questions, comments from the board? Sharon?
I completely concur with Commissioner Littleton. I think it is a huge trust issue you guys are facing. A lot of frustration. A lot of frustration from people that didn't really feel that the listening sessions were listening sessions. They were informing sessions. We'll listen and then we'll inform you what we're going to do. So I think there's a lot of frustration, and you're already kind of on that edge of not having a lot of trust. A managed lane does not mean it has to be a toll lane, correct? A managed lane can be an HOV lane.
Correct.
So that is another possibility. Even though I agree it needs to be free, managed doesn't have to mean people laying out more money. This is kind of really off the subject, but is there, since it is transportation related, we have a problem with some walls and graffiti around here, and it takes weeks to get the graffiti removed. I'd like you guys to consider a faster removal program. And we had a wall completely covered, a third of it, like recently. It took weeks to get it done because you had to order paint. I don't understand why you don't have paint on hand. It's kind of a given when the weather warms up and schools start getting out for spring breaks, kids are going to start graffitiing again. You need to be prepared. I got on the freeway this morning at exit 128. They've added to it. Now it says FU as you get on the freeway. Not exactly the nicest thing I think you guys want us getting on. And, you know, so please get on top of your graffiti responsibility with your walls. It affects the way the whole city looks and the way people look at how your city is. So there's got to be a way to have some type of graffiti team and get it done faster. If you have a section of a wall that's like this one, been graffitied 2 or 3 times, maybe use paint that you can use soap and water to remove it on and seal it somehow. It is available out there. So it just is another part of having trust with the citizens in the area.
Could I ask, and I appreciate that. I firmly believe that you know, if you stay on top of that, there's going to be less. You know, it's less likely that it gets tagged again. Is there? And Karen, I don't know the answer to this, but is there cooperation between CDOT and the local communities, law enforcement? Are there other programs beyond just eradicating it when it comes up? Are they working with schools? Are we working with anybody else? Are there other programs, public programs, that can help, you know, minimize the number of times that anybody's public infrastructure gets tagged?
Well, the short answer in my city is going to be no. We don't have the responsibility. We don't have the money to paint your walls.
That's not what I'm suggesting. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Okay, I want to make sure.
Is there something, do we know who the taggers are? Do we know?
I know we take photos of them, try to work with the schools. They keep
Yeah.
records of that kind of stuff and all that. I have no idea what the sheriff's department does, but the short answer is the faster you cover it up, the less somebody's going to keep tagging on it and answering it. So anyways, and then secondly, that's great the Gap is getting all the attention. That's great 24 is getting a lot of attention that's needed, but we need to widen I-25 all the way down to the Pueblo border. And I'm very concerned that some of the other projects that are on board are going to, that we're 2 lanes. And we have just as many accidents down in some areas, down in the Fountain Way, as they do up in the other directions. And we have nowhere to get off. There's no place for it to get off. A good example was the fire that, thank you, Fort Carson, for almost burning me out Sunday. They shut down the freeway. People sitting there trying to get somewhere, they had absolutely nowhere to go. There's nowhere to get off. And so, I'm not saying if we'd had 3 lanes that would have been any different. I'm just using that as the newest example of we have got to get it widened to 3 lanes all the way down. And no comment that was made at another meeting here was that if an environmental study is not completed, anything else that gets widened is going to be tolled. That doesn't make any sense, that you're going to be tolling everywhere now.
Well, I think with regard to the widening south of the Springs, we agree that that's a future challenge as well. And I think, as Commissioner Van Werf indicated, that, this is where PPACG has to decide on what its priorities are based on the amount of money that is available and that may be available for the future. So I think that's a discussion that we feel strongly that we want to engage with, want to be partners, but it has to be coming from you, this group, on how very difficult decisions about where the highest priorities are, and as more money becomes available, how do we start ticking off those improvements?
Right. We need to keep military preparation as a consideration in that, too.
One more. County Commissioner Dick Elsner.
Yeah, this is Dick Elsner from Park County. One thing I really don't want you to lose sight of is the rural part of PPACG, which is Park County. They were talking about the backup turning left to go up Pikes Peak of several miles. Last summer, I left Burro Days in Fairplay, heading towards Bailey, and I got as far as Como, which meant that I had 32 miles of stop-and-go traffic to get home. And it took about 3.5 hours to go that 32 miles. We have issues in Park County on 285 with the tremendous increase in trucks because of the aggregate that is used in Denver that's coming out of Fairplay. And I really think you need to start taking a look at some of those routes. I know Highway 9 during the winter becomes a mess when I-70 is closed. We had an incident where I-70 was closed and it was backed up from Hoosier Pass all the way down to Fairplay. And then once you got back onto 285, it was backed up from about Jefferson to Bailey. So these are other issues that are, I think, really coming up that you need to take a look at some of the other rural areas because our traffic is just becoming absolutely, it's unbearable at times, and it's because of all the people in Denver and Colorado Springs that love to go to the mountains, and we love to have them in the mountains, but we would also like them to be able to get home.
I appreciate that, and I've experienced that eastbound 285 queue up Kenosha Pass on a Sunday evening.
Okay.
And so I've lived it. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's another example. I mean, we don't agree on everything, but I think what we do agree on is there are continuing and growing needs to invest in transportation across the state. And I hear that everywhere. I hear that whether I'm out in the northern plains, I'm on the western slope, I'm in Durango, I'm in the Summit County or Eagle County. There are very impassioned demands for improvements, and I get it, and I want to do something about it, and I think it's having these public discussions is important, and I think that what I really value in the STAC meeting is that all regions of the state get to share that, and the parochialism, and I don't mean that pejoratively, is somewhat lessened because there's a recognition that all of the Colorado economy benefits when everything is working for everybody. But it means that we have to make difficult decisions. We have to continue to articulate for increased funding. And we're never going to have everything we need, and we probably shouldn't have everything we need because something else wouldn't be getting what it needs. But we need to keep fighting for it, and we need to keep doing the best we can efficiently. I very much respect the comments that were made by the commissioners, and I do not want to go to any meeting, though, and just speak platitudes. I want to be very candid and honest, and I will take candid and honest criticism, and I want to work with you, continue to work with you, and but I don't want to just come to a meeting and avoid difficult discussions.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think we appreciate your time and trip down to Colorado Springs this morning. I know we had early breakfast this morning. I left the house early this morning just to be here today. So, thank you so much. This is an ongoing conversation, obviously. Director, your presence here today is just one of thousands of meetings that will continue between this organization and yours. And
any time that you want me or the staff on an issue, I will make myself available because this is what we do.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. We're certainly welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. We've got lots of exciting things to talk about this morning.
I want to hear from these guys.
Yeah. Well, they're on our list, down the list. So move on to other public comments. I think we have one from the El Paso County Sheriff, and I'll welcome Lieutenant Bill Huffer to the podium, please.
Can you hear me now? There we go. My name is Bill Huffer. I'm a lieutenant with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, and I want to thank the board for letting me come by and just give a brief update on our marijuana efforts thus far in 2018. Thank you, Commissioner Littleton, for inviting me. So, if you haven't noticed, we're making a big dent, especially recently. And I'll give you our first quarter stats related to marijuana enforcement here in a minute. But one of the most common questions I get is why now? Why are we seeing an uptick in enforcement since January 1st or recently? Some people think it's political, but I'm here to tell you that because of the legislation that took effect January 1st, which limited residential plant counts to 12, that was the piece that we needed to up our enforcement. And Sheriff Elder and his staff led the effort to get that legislation passed because we knew we needed that legislation in order to conduct proper enforcement. Prior to that, people could have medical marijuana in their residence, and they could get extended plant counts up to 99 plants, and they could be a caregiver for 5 people. So it made it very difficult for us to enforce illegal marijuana cultivation, even though we knew that's what they were doing. The medical marijuana statutes allowed them to cultivate illegally under the guise of medical marijuana. So that's the reason you're seeing the uptick in enforcement, is that new legislation. So residential property can have 12 plants, only 6 of which can be flowering at any given time. And so between the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, Metro Vice Narcotics, CSPD, the DEA, we have probably the best working relationship that we've ever had. And we are getting it done. So I'll just give you some stats, and I brought some flyers about illegal marijuana grows. I'll just leave it with the board. They can hand those out as they see fit. But it's good material on how to educate citizens on what to look for, how to report illegal marijuana or what is suspected to be illegal marijuana. So I'll give you our first quarter stats, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I know your time is valuable, so let me try and figure out my phone. They made us switch. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to say that I contribute to that traffic. My wife is from Fairplay, and so we go to Borough Days every year, and we enjoy it very much. So, we actually are fortunate enough to have a cabin that we stay in until everybody leaves, and then we go home. So, right? I know. So since January 1st, in conjunction with Metro Vice Narcotics and the DEA, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office has executed 30 search warrants against illegal marijuana cultivation. We've conducted 30 additional what we call knock-and-talks, where we just knock on the door and we say, hey, are you growing marijuana? And they say, yes, I am. And then we say, can we look at it? And they say, sure. And then we take their marijuana. So if it's over 12, that's right. And so we've contacted 60 homes is what that equals to. 30 have been search warrants, 30 have been just what we call knock-and-talks. We've taken 2,400 illegal marijuana plants. Street value of those is approximately $12 million. And here's how we get to that number. Each marijuana plant, especially these big, these growers are getting very good. And so these plants can produce about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of usable marijuana. And so each plant, 2,400 times 1.5 gets your pounds. You multiply that by about $3,500 per pound is what it sells for outside of Colorado, which is where all of it goes, I can assure you. That's how we get to that number. 2,400 plants, $12 million worth, 250 pounds of processed marijuana that was ready to go in seal meal bags, ready to be shipped out of state. That value is approximately another $1 million. Last week we seized a marijuana trimming machine. It's worth about $10,000, so we seized that. We've taken 13 guns, legal guns off the street, and we've made 16 arrests. So that's just an overview of what we've done since January 1st. I can assure you that those numbers are going to grow throughout the year. We're dedicating as many resources as we can to this problem. The outdoor grow season is upon us, and those grows are 400, 500, 600 plants strong. And so we're actually going to be up in an airplane this week scouting some suspected outdoor grows that are going to get planted. So anyway, I just wanted to give you an update on what we've done since January 1st, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Just a comment, Lieutenant, I thank you, pass on to Sheriff Elder that Sheriff Jason Mikesell in Teller County, really appreciate the close working relationship, especially through the V&I organization you've set up.
That's right.
Thanks for the close cooperation.
I will. And just so if people in the room don't know, Metro V&I is a regional unit that serves the entire judicial district, so Teller County all the way down to Fountain and everywhere in El Paso County.
Yes,
and Teller County.
And I think, Lieutenant Huffer, you've actually been remiss in not mentioning how many illegal marijuana grows you still have yet to do.
That's
because
true.
it's something on the order of 550 more.
That's true.
So it's a really, really big number. And I think another thing I'd like to mention, and this is actually for Mr. Lewis's benefit, there's a lot of cooperation between CDOT, the Sheriff's Office, and the other public agencies in here to deal with homeless camps. When we have homeless camps, we do have these camps often in places where jurisdiction is very difficult to deal with. You have a mix of private property, county jurisdiction, and CDOT jurisdiction, so it's difficult sometimes to address those. But in some of these homeless camps, they're next to stream beds and creeks, and some of those that are on CDOT jurisdiction are in that kind of a place. And these have issues and challenges sometimes with public safety and public health. The public health part of it is because of the pollution that goes into the creek. And I just wanted to kind of mention to you, Mr. Lewis, appreciate your cooperation, but I wanted to make sure you knew about this.
Yeah.
We run the potential of EPA MS4 violations because of this. And that is not only a public health issue for all citizens, it's also a liability issue for CDOT and the other public agencies in the region here. So I appreciate the cooperation, and we just need to stay on top of it. And this may be an issue you have in other urban areas around Colorado, but we certainly have this challenge here. Like the efforts, the new bridge, I-25 and 24, you took a specific effort in that to clean out the shrubbery and the overgrowth, and this is actually helping a lot for reducing homeless camps in that area. And this may be perhaps a needed policy in other areas that are CDOT jurisdiction where the road is not necessarily being upgraded or changed, which would get you to a clean out part, but maybe just still considering doing it anyway. Because I think that would help, and it's really the public health and public safety concerns that I have. Thanks.
And I'll second that real quick before you leave. I don't know their last names, so I apologize, but Troy and James have been excellent to work with in the city and the county. They help us out constantly with homeless camps and working with us. So I appreciate that comment, and Karen, I know Steve knows right now. So we'll make sure that this board Right. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. It is. Right. Mm-hmm. Agree.
Maybe just wrap up?
Sure. So I'll just wrap up with what I was remiss in. The commissioner's correct. We started the year with about 600 illegal marijuana grows. We've taken down 40 to 50 already. And what we've also seen in the last couple of weeks is that we haven't seen before is when we knock on these doors or we execute a search warrant, we are finding that in the last 2 weeks alone, we found 3 grows that have been totally dismantled and they're gone. And so that's a win, even though we don't get to make an arrest or take illegal marijuana, they're moving on. And so my contact information is on the clipboard. If you have any questions, I'm always available. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Good. Any other people on public comment? Items not on the agenda. One more, please. Maybe just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Good morning. I'm Nancy McCaffrey, and I'm a resident of Colorado Springs. I'm also a board member of Rail, and I was here in February at your meeting, and I was very excited to see this moving forward 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. I was very excited. Took the survey. However, I was a little disappointed because passenger rail was really not listed as an option. And as you all know, the population in the Pikes Peak area could be equal to or greater than the Denver metropolitan area in 2045. And so I think it's important to think of the fact that gridlock could be decreased with having something like passenger rail along the Front Range. So I had a really nice discussion with Jennifer Valentine, and she said that you could write in passenger rail on the survey. There was an ability to write it in. But I feel in terms of data collection, it's really helpful to have it listed as a regular option on the survey. So I just hope that perhaps you can consider redoing the survey. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment on things not on the agenda? Very good, thank you. Move on then to consent items. Is there any item on items 4, A, B, C, D would like to be pulled off for discussion? Andy?
Well, minor correction on the minutes, if bring that up.
We'll pull that for discussion. Any others to be pulled off for discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment real quick. You have the item D is the call for projects. Actually ties in with the previous speaker's comments. That is actually opening up our process to take projects in for the 2045 plan. Right now, your jurisdictional staff all know about that, but this opens up the process officially starting today, correct, Ken? And goes through July 30th. So the list of projects that Mr. Lewis talked about earlier, the unfunded list of $6 billion or $10 billion, may grow based on what we get in that process. But just wanted to let you know that that's under the consent agenda.
Very good. Any other items to be? We'll pull off the minutes for consideration. A motion to approve items B, C, and D.
So moved.
All those in favor of the consent B, C, and D? Aye. Opposed, nay? Great. Okay, item 4A. Andy, what's your correction?
Just a minor correction on the minutes. Noted down there that as we were discussing the goals for the scoring criteria, that Mayor Levy motioned for approval, seconded by Mayor Levy, which I'm very impressed with his abilities and performance, but I'm kind of reminded of my two-man control procedures in years past. And looking at the tape last night, I think I made that motion and for both of those, for that and the following one. So just a minor correction.
Very good. Any other corrections to the minutes then? With those corrections noted, all those in favor of the minutes as corrected, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Great, thank you for the correction. Move on then to action items 5A, the 2019-22 TIP. Ken Prather, this is a big one.
Good morning, Ken Prather, Acting Transportation Planner. In February, the board released the draft 2019 to 2022 tip for public comment. The comment period ended March 21st. We received a number of comments, as we always do, that general spelling, grammar, punctuation, typos, formatting, and those were all corrected. One of the errors was in the last line of the tip project table, the funding table, and that was caught at the CAC meeting. And it's a total dollars identified in the tip, and it's supposed to have added up local, state, and federal dollars, and only added up 2 of them. So CAC picked up on that immediately, and everybody else missed it. So that was corrected. One other error in the funding table, or the project table, was in the year 2019 under the Transportation Alternatives Program category. Error in the formula in the spreadsheet. There's actually was no money available that year for the Fountain Creek Regional Trail Extension project. So that project was delayed or pushed back 1 year. It did not lose any funding. It just got delayed, so it will start in 2020 instead of 2019. Mountain Metro, Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit had project funding pools in the tip, and during the comment period, they identified the 9 projects that they were going to fund with those pools, and so those projects were identified and added to the tip. With the new performance management requirements from the feds, the performance targets that we've adopted, there's a requirement for transportation plans and tips to address those. So FHWA and CDOT drafted some language that and proposed that be added to address the transportation performance measurements. Also, CDOT has an annual state transportation improvement program, the STIP. Our TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, is every other year. So it's a 2-year TIP. So every other year we're in sync. This year we are in sync. The years match up for both documents. But next year we will be out of sync because CDOT will adopt a new STIP, but we won't. When that happens, the 4th year of CDOT's STIP, they cannot access the funds because it's not in our TIP. So this is a statewide issue that is being addressed of how to accommodate that. But FHWA wanted that language identified, that there is a consequence of being out of sync with the STIP, and that we are trying to address that through the statewide planning process, and so that was added. I think that's the highlights of the changes that were made. They were identified in the attachment in your memo. You could also go online and look at the whole, I think it's about 70 pages now, document, and the changes were identified there in highlighting or a colored text. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. What you're being asked is to approve the TIP. It won't be effective. It'll still require, to be adopted into the state STIP. It'll also require federal approval, so it will not be effective until July 1.
Yeah, just the weight of this is one of the primary obligations of any MPO is the development, prioritization of tasks in the Transportation Improvement Program. What you're about to consider is the prioritization of projects totaling $168 million over the next 4 years. The process to get to this development has gone through the CAC, the TAC, the 2 primary committees. Mobility Committee also comment on this as well, I think, for transit.
Yes, TAC and CAC did review it, and they do both recommend approval.
Great, thank you. Now, the approval today would then move this for this. This is our recommended approval project, both to state and then to the federal highways. It is possible at this point, if you don't like something on this list, to make a change and move money around. That would probably throw the staff into a panic, though, if we would start changing projects at this point. But any delay in the approval today, even though it can be done, would probably delay availability of funds for the 1 July project start, because Ken, I think they need a couple of months at Federal Highways to actually review the actual projects and keep them up.
So Federal Highways requires a couple of months from today to get it done, so that was the reason for shooting for this month. So if we delay it a month or two, then it would be a month or two later, the July or August or something, before the new tip would be approved. Our current tip dies June 30th. No matter what, it dies, and if we do not have a tip, then no federal action can be taken on a road, even if there's no money involved, if it's just approval of something, and certainly no federal dollars can be spent.
Okay. Any discussion on the actual projects are not included in your packet. Those were included in a web link. Hopefully you've had time to review those. We did talk about these in our work session on Friday, and I'm encouraged if board members who, if you're not part of that now, that you attend those work sessions in preparation for meetings like this board meeting today. So any question, discussion on the TIP projects contained therein? Stan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ken, just a kind of a question. It's a procedural question, because I'm not that familiar with how this interacts with federal funding and so forth. But to the extent that we may be pursuing other grant requirements, like we have the infra grant for I-25, but in the future, I'm sure we're going to have more needs that we're going to want to express to the federal government. Just to make things up, might be Highway 24 improvements west of Colorado Springs, maybe something like that. If it's not expressly stated in here, does that mean it's impossible to receive that grant money from the federal government, or is that run separately and we don't necessarily have to have it expressed in this document?
We will amend the TIP anytime that there's a need to do so. So if there is money that, as Mr. Lewis is saying, falls off of a tree or out of the sky or comes from anywhere, and that gets available to us, we can add that money, and we can add the projects that money would use.
So there might be perhaps two conditions. One where we just happen to find ourselves as a beneficiary of federal money, and then we can amend the TIP to include that. But also, if we wanted to be proactive about pursuing a grant, we could also amend the TIP. So in either case, we can do that through this board.
To put a project into the TIP, we must have money for it identified. It's not a wish list. It is a fiscally constrained list.
Okay. I don't know if there's, it's just a procedure again. I don't know if there are even opportunities where maybe the federal government might fully fund it, in which case there wouldn't be. Maybe those are small projects where that might be
Still needs to be in our TIP. And then we get those requests from CDOT to amend our TIP, but it's still this board's decision to amend that TIP.
Okay.
Even to add projects with money that's come from off a tree someplace.
Okay. Well, that's fine. So, but we can amend the TIP when we run into those.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
And let me just point out, you can also remove projects. You can create unspent balances. That's also possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Other question? Yes, Pat.
Thank you. Could you explain just a little bit why it costs $500,000 a year to do a mobility management call center? What does that include, a call center?
We have, Brian, do you want to come up?
Part of what we do.
There is a call center that we have been working on. It's a regional call center that we've been trying to develop rather than Silver Key, Fountain Valley Senior Center, the Resource Exchange, and all of these other specialized transportation facilities. Rather than having their own call center and their own staffing, is to consolidate that and make it more efficient and a cost savings. And that's been effort for many years to get that developed and operational, and I think now it's over in your building, isn't it, Brian? Do you want to comment on the current status?
Sure. Good morning, Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. Carrying on with what Ken said, this has been more than a decade's worth of coordination and collaboration between the city, a lot of the specialized transportation providers, a couple that are in the audience. As Ken mentioned, Silver Key, AmbliCab, Fountain Valley Senior Center, and community intersections. So this has been a long-term goal of the region to consolidate and make it more simple for passengers needing specialized transportation services to go to one place to get a ride. Currently we have multiple organizations providing similar services, oftentimes same vehicles going down the same road to pick up passengers. So there's a great opportunity for efficiencies, and that's been a long-term goal for this. And as Ken said, over the past year, we did start up that coordination at Mountain Metro's offices, and we have a call center facility that's ready for the official startup the mid part of this year. So we're gearing up for that, and this is just continuing the operation of that call center.
How many
starting it
calls
up
do
and
you
continuing.
get per day for requests?
I'm sorry?
How many calls do you get per day for requests or?
I'm not the best one to answer that because I'm more on the fixed route side. I don't know what the volume is. Perhaps Gail or
Okay.
Ms. Nellis could answer those questions. But, Mountain Metro has their complimentary ADA paratransit service
Right.
that we have to provide in addition to our fixed route service. So that is a key component of the call center, but also the specialized transportation providers. But I'm not sure of the volume of calls that we receive.
Okay. I don't know if she wants to answer it or not.
Yep. If I may. So Gail Nels with McCaffrey and also representing the Mobility Coordinating Committee. I applaud your question. I think it's an excellent question because sometimes one has to look at if an idea hasn't bore fruit over 10 years, is it the right idea? Right. So please continue, I think, asking questions. As I understand it, there has been some overselling of this idea over the years. And so we just, the four nonprofits that are part of this joint dispatch and call center have recently submitted our proposal responses to the RFP. We've had many, the group of us have had many concerns, exceptions, and raised potential issues. So I just would like to put that out there to help inform your question. When it comes to the number of calls being handled by the call center, currently the call center resides with Silver Key, and they are the ones answering the calls. The last time I heard at a meeting, it was 40 per month.
40 per month, okay.
But that is without a lot of publicity or promotion because it is still in the development stage.
Okay. So
right now, Peggy, if you want to get a ride to a doctor's appointment and you have your broken ankle, you call Silver Key and they call you back and they can't provide your ride. You have to turn around and call Mountain Mobility and try to get a ride from them. You have to turn around and call another provider and try to get a ride from them. The One Call Center is an attempt to make one call, and whichever service will have a rider in your area that you qualify to ride would provide the transportation. And I think part of your question is staffing is going to be included in that. Is that correct? And software and things like that. And then probably some office space rent and things like that. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, to me, it seemed like a simple web-based software solution, and I can't imagine something costing $500,000 to do that.
The problem is
staffing,
that not everybody uses the same software, of course. Mountain Metro uses a different
Well, that's where we need to go
Software,
back and go
then-
look and go, what one software do we use for everybody so that we don't spend $500,000?
Right, well, but like take the senior center,
don't
for
know.
example, we just spent quite a bit of money on a software.
If it was a simple process, it would have been implemented 10 years ago.
Andy, real quick.
Yeah, I looked into this too several years back, and I dove into it, and there is a lot more complex in integrating the software, particularly because they have different privacy requirements from the different programs, and you can't actually integrate them all, the databases together. So it was very, very complex, and it's more of a startup, and I'm sure that the usage will increase more than the start, what it is right now. But it's something we've been trying to track and make sure we provide that service to those who need it at the lowest cost.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on the proposed draft tip? Ken?
Jennifer, Irving just reminded me, I failed to mention I-25. Last month, you approved amendment number 16 to our current tip to add the I-25 gap project. This draft document that you're approving today also includes that I-25 gap project as an additional north and southbound lane. And it doesn't say how many lanes, and it doesn't say whether it's managed or not. So until the final decision is made by CDOT, it is still a valid project in the tip as it is currently phrased. Once CDOT makes its decision, then as Commissioner Vanderverse has pointed out, we will be required to amend the tip to reflect the proper description or the final description of the project and the final cost within the 2 miles or so that's in El Paso County.
Just a reminder, that was $50 million total, including a local match.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, we have a proposed motion to approve the draft FY 2019-2022 tip.
So moved.
Motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Here you go, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of hard work there.
Chair?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Can I request that the CDOT update be moved forward? We have a remembrance date on above. That it'd be nice if we could leave a little bit early.
We can do that. Any objections to that? Karen, it's all yours.
Thank you. So I do like the color orange, but that's not necessarily why I'm all dressed in orange today. This week is National Work Zone Awareness Week, and we try to bring awareness to those that are working the construction field on the road. CDOT in particular, so this whole week is National Work Zone Awareness Week. Today is Work Zone Awareness Day, so we're asked to wear as much orange as possible in recognition of that. In Region 2 in Pueblo, we are holding our Remembrance Day for those that have died in the line of duty, in essence, at CDOT, where they've been hit by traffic while working on our roads. And we had one die in 2006 and one in 2009, and their kids kids are now teenagers and show up at our Remembrance Day. It's a big deal in Region 2. There's about 12 total for Region 2, and at headquarters tomorrow will be our statewide Remembrance Day. We did move headquarters, so I will send out the new map to our new headquarters, CDOT headquarters. We are now at 5615 Wills Boulevard. The easy way I try to say is behind Chili's and behind Kohl's. So Chili's is on one side of Elizabeth and Kohl's is on the other side. We're behind the Kohl's department store down on the north end of Pueblo now. And so we just made the move on Monday. We're still going through a few bumps, but pretty exciting change as our old facilities were built. Some of the buildings were from 1945 and not ADA accessible and spread out, and we were crossing an active street to get to different buildings and things like that. So now we're on a 12-acre campus, and it's much safer and much more productive and much more efficient. We're with State Patrol also in their dispatch center, and we will be starting a Region 2 Traffic Management Center in August, and it's the first one of its kind around the state in terms that it's just will control the traffic operations for Region 2. So we're decentralizing from those in Golden, so that those that control the cameras and the variable message signs. And we'll be working with the Colorado Springs Traffic Management Center too, and we'll be co-located with State Patrol. So that's what's a little unique about it. So we'll see how that works out moving forward, but we're trying to be more efficient and effective with our resources. So right now, the tentative date for the environmental assessment public hearing is May 16th. That's the last I've heard. So the environmental assessment will come out, and it has a 30-day comment period. During that time, we gather as much comments as we can, and then I think it's 2 weeks after the EA is released, we have to have, not sooner than 2 weeks before the EA comes out, you have a public hearing. So again, we've had what we call listening sessions. Those are two-way dialogues. These public hearings are more a one-way dialogue. We just document the comments. People have a 3-minute period to come up and speak. We have court recorders. We have computers. We have comment cards, all that kind of stuff. And during that 30-day comment period, it'll be up on the website and available to comment and things like that. And after that comment period's over, then we issue our record of decision. If the EA holds, it'll be a finding of no significant impact.
For which project, Karen?
This is for I-25, the gap. Sorry. That's the only one we have going on right now for CDOT in this area. So again, that's what we're looking at is May 16th, the evening public hearing for your information. And so I've taken a few notes of things to get back and work with individuals on issues for CDOT. And so you're always welcome to email me or let me know if there's any other issues that are concerned, if you don't want to bring it up at the board meeting or have another time frame for it. We are fixing the Nevada rock rimmen, what we call bumps in the roads. So what they're doing right now, just so you know, is constructing the inside. They're widening on the inside. So again, that'll be for a future 4-lane. But in the near term, it'll be so we can shift traffic over, keep it 3 lanes at all time during the day, and then fix the outside lanes. Then we'll move traffic over to the outside lanes and fix the inside lanes. And then we'll fix the off-ramp. So and then when we're all done, we need to replace bridge joints, we need to fix the concrete, we need to, raise up the elevation, and then we'll pave it over with asphalt. And most of the settlement should have occurred. It's down pretty deep in a clay layer. That's why we have those bumps in the road. The bridges stay the same. The approaches sink. The asphalt will help us come back and pave over and help us be more flexible with any bumps that may occur in the future, but we think the majority of the settlement has occurred. And we did take steps on Cimarron to watch that settlement and make sure that it's minimal by the time we're done with the project so that we don't have that issue for those bridges on that project. So that's the major project in the area is at Nevada Rock Rim, and if you're wondering what the construction is going on there. I think December is the final date. I mean, I think the majority of it will be done sooner, but the main thing is phasing. So we're just trying to keep 3 lanes going in each direction during the day. And there's other minor projects in the area, but that's the major one. Under bid right now is 31st Street and US 24 and Bridge Road and US 24. So we're looking at making improvements at those 2 intersections that kind of go hand in hand with each other. That's under bid right now, as well as an I-25 cable rail project between Colorado Springs and Pueblo. So if you don't mind, at 1 o'clock we have our big Remembrance Day ceremony, but I will get you the new address and map, and we have nicer facilities for other meetings and other activities down in Pueblo.
Any quick questions for Karen? Yep.
Karen, for the May 16th meeting, you said it was going to be evening. Do you have a location yet, or do you need a location?
They're trying to schedule the library 21C. I don't know for sure. I think that's why the date is in flux, because they're trying to make sure that that's available. So I don't know right now. Again, Region 1 is coordinating that. I think it was a week ago. They were looking at May 16th at Library 21C.
Okay. Possibly, even if that does not work out, I would say that the Centennial Hall holds quite a few people. So as a second choice, maybe.
Okay. I will let them know that. We seem to get, when we had the listening sessions, the most participation and the most activity up north. Yeah, so I will offer that, though, so thank you.
All right, we'll return then to action items, item 5B. Ken?
Ken Prather, PPACG Acting Transportation Director. Last month, you approved the 12 evaluation criteria that will be used in scoring projects that are proposed to be included in the 2045 plan. The next step in the process is to develop the weighting or the priority of those criteria. That's a function that you assign to the Community Advisory Committee. They went through a process called a multi-criteria analysis process that I can go into if you so wish. But they identified the weighting or the priority of the criteria that's in your memo, and I'll just read that real quickly here. Safety was 13.5. Benefit cost ratio was 13.1. Maintenance, 12. Mobility for auto and freight, 9.6. Vehicle delay, 8.3. Transit connectivity and accessibility, 7.8. Infill, 7.4. Mobility for transit, 6.9. Modal integration and ADA accessibility, 6.4. Environment is 5.8. Non-motorized connectivity and accessibility, 4.8. And mobility for non-motorized is 4.5. Now, the way these weights are used is that staff will do an evaluation of a candidate project, and let's take the first one there, safety. And for instance, we will use the criteria that was approved and say it has a score of 3. We would apply the weighting, and if the weighting here is approved of 13.5, then the final weighted score for that project, for that criteria, would be 40.5. So if we had a candidate project and they scored 3 on all 12 categories, the total weighted project score would be 300.3. You just multiply the the technical score by the weight, and you come up with the weighted score. Then what happens is we use that total weighted score, we rank all the projects, highest to lowest, and we begin a discussion with the TAC and the Community Advisory Committee and come back to you based on the amount of funding available, starting at the top, moving down, moving some projects around because scoring criteria just doesn't work for this category of project, or no matter what the score says, my project needs to be funded. We have that kind of a discussion, and then the board approves a final funded list to be included in the project. So the scoring of the project is not the end-all to be all. It is a tool, and the weighting is part of it. It reflects the priorities of the CAC, which is representing the public in this case.
Any questions for Ken? All right. The proposed motion is to approve the scoring criteria weights. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, nay? All right. Thank you, Ken. Very good. All right. Third item, action 5C, a legislative update. Jessica McMullen. She makes her way up. While she's making her way up, let me just say that the legislative committee for Pikes Peak Council here meets every week, every Monday at 4 p.m. It reviews input from our legislative lobbyist, Lauren Furman. So this is a pretty well considered, and I think it makes big gains this year in having Laura on board.
As everyone knows, I'm actually going to break the rules today and have my cell phone up here because I'm going to call Lauren in to join us as soon as she tells me she's ready. Okay, give me just a second.
While they're dialing in, Andy, I would love to say I think hiring a legislative lobbyist has been a tremendous help last year for us to try to
Hello.
go
I
through
can.
them. And
Give me
it's just been
just a
great
second, and I will put
service.
you up to the microphone.
So on the legislative committee, Councilmember Sharon Thompson, Mark Waller, Jill and myself, and who else has been? Neil, yes, been joining us by phone.
And Turner as well, although he has been unable to attend.
Yes.
Yep, and Tyler, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize really quick. I should put this on speaker. Really quick, what we have talked about and what is in your packet. As you know, we track the legislation. New bills for review this month. Senate Bill 18-196 repeals the late vehicle registration fee. Under current law, if a motor vehicle has failed to be registered, you get a $25 fee every month to a cap of $100. The bill repeals that late fee, which was included in the FAFSA bill several years ago, and the Legislative Committee reviewed and suggested a monitor position. Board discussion. Or would you like Lauren to chime in on it?
Where is that bill now?
Lauren, can you tell us where Senate Bill 196 is?
Right now, the bill passed out of the Senate, was assigned to the House State Affairs Committee. It's going to be scheduled to be heard on the 12th. So this week.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Any discussion, any recommendation to change that position? We have officially a monitor position on Senate Bill 196.
And then I would ask Lauren to give us a quick update from the Capitol, especially on Senate Bill 1, which has been continuing to be an active conversation.
Thank you, Jessica. We've got 20 working days left down here at the Capitol. I have heard there's still about 300 bills still to try to get through both chambers, which is a bit unusual in terms of the amount. It's a bit high for this time in the session, but that's because we had a lot of bills introduced early on in the session. In terms of transportation, I want to talk about two bills right now. Not just Senate Bill 1, but also the orbital bill of the state budget, House Bill 1340. 1340 is basically a companion bill to the state budget to try to secure the $495 million from the general fund to the state highway fund, and says basically that if Senate bill doesn't pass, this funding would still be insured on a quarterly basis. The Senate passed House Bill 1340, sent it over to the House as amended. What they did when they amended it was they stripped out the funding formula to the locals on how funding would be distributed to county cities and multimodal transportation options. So the bill, one that got to the House rejected the Senate version of the bill, so they will go to conference today. Moving on from that, Senate Bill 1 got out of the Senate, has now been sent to the House Transportation Committee, has not yet been scheduled for a hearing. Senate Bill 1 still includes the $495 million, the 10% distribution to local governments, also includes language by Senator Zenzinger that pushes that long-term funding from the general fund of $250 million each year from the general fund from 2018 to 2019. And the intent of that is to basically give the ballot initiatives that we've been hearing about a shot on the ballot this year to see if they will pass. In terms of the status of Senate Bill 1, right now that is completely unknown. I have not been pulled into a meeting with the Speaker within the last 4 or 5 days to get an update from her. She's been pretty good about trying to keep everybody up to speed. Right now she has two choices. She can either kill the bill in the House Transportation Committee, or she can work on the bill and amend it and send it back to the Senate and then go to conference. The House Democrats are pushing back on Senate Bill 1. They're very concerned that the long-term funding provision would interfere with any kind of funding for education. So they don't want to see a bond provision in this bill dedicating $250 million from the general fund because of obviously the concerns they have about funding education in the future years. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Any questions for Jessica or Lauren?
Okay, then I'll
Great.
thank Lauren for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Very good. All right, thank you. So we've not formally taken a position. The staff, the legislative committee recommends a position on Senate Bill 18196 of monitor. Any further discussion on that? The proposed motion on 196 is to adopt a monitor position. Is there a motion? Oh, pardon me.
My
yes.
apologies, that is actually
Should have been an action item.
is an action item, and I had that wrong in there. That's why it's listed under action items, even if my memo shows it wrong. Shame.
Okay, so moved.
All right. Is there a second? There is. Second. All right. Any discussion on taking a monitor position on Senate Bill 196? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate all your work on this one. All right. Final. Move on to then reports, military installations, and maybe Rod, you start off this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick items for Fort Carson. The first one, and I know many of you are aware, but we are in actually a public comment period right now under the National Environmental Policy Act for the Army's decision to convert an infantry brigade combat team to an armor brigade combat team. And so the one that's going to be converted is our 2nd Infantry Brigade, which is actually deployed right now. It's deployed in areas operations in Afghanistan, and when it returns would go through some configuration. One of the alternatives is to keep that brigade at Fort Carson but convert it to an armor brigade. And what's at risk at Fort Carson if it was to move to one of the other 4 installations being considered in the environmental document for public review right now is about 4,000 soldiers and 80 major pieces of equipment, M1's tanks, and then Bradley fighting vehicles. So a considerable amount of fighting power and, of course, 4,000 soldiers and the results of families and dependents and whatever could possibly be relocated. So we've already got a great swell of support. Military Affairs Committee's done a great job. Most of the folks that are in elected positions and legislatures have all banded together and have already inputted to this process, but the actual comment period is open all the way till the 29th of April. So for your continued interaction with the public, if you're encouraging some folks to make some comment that it really makes a lot of sense to keep that brigade here, both to support our local community, but also to support the military and not going through the cost of relocating it to another installation and spending more money just to put it to another installation. Fort Carson has had 2 armored brigades in the past, so we have the training capacity and the range capacity to support 2 armored brigades. And they didn't list it as a preferred alternative, but it is the basic preferred alternative, I think, that's being considered. But it still doesn't harm to have the public comment during this period. So that's the main thing. And I'll pause before my second thing just to see if there's any questions on that.
Andy has one.
Well, no questions on that. We became aware of this fairly recently, and our city councils are drafting a letter, and I'd like to invite the county commissioners to do that as a joint letter. So we're working on that.
Appreciate all that support. And so when that brigade combat team comes back, this conversion is supposed to occur between September and next October. So it's not a long-term thing. It's going to happen very quickly in the next government fiscal year, 2019. And then the second thing I just want to mention is just a quick announcement. Colonel Ron Fitch, our garrison commander, will end his 2-year command tour on the 6th of July. He's been very engaged with a lot of you, knows a lot of you personally, and has been very engaged in the community. And we'll get more details out on the change of command and the ceremony and the details of any receptions or whatever. But the incoming commander is a Colonel Andrew Wardinger, and he'll be taking command on the 6th of July. That's about the major leadership transition that we have at Fort Carson. All the 4ID, because of all the deployments and everything, is not due to rotate. So this will probably be our major leadership position to rotate this summer.
Yeah, Andy.
Go ahead.
Or, Norm.
Commissioner?
Yeah, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you mind talking a little bit about live fire exercises on Fort Carson and what the status of those are going to be here in the near future, given our fire danger situation?
We still have a very active rotation. I mentioned the 2nd Brigade is actually deployed. We're training up to deploy the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade, and as well as the division headquarters later on. So the use of our ranges is still going to be a continued requirement on Fort Carson and Piñon Canyon as well. So we do have measures in place. We call them red flag measures, so that we don't fire certain types of munitions that have more tendency to cause fire, like tracer rounds that the gunners can kind of see because of a phosphorus that's being spread out with every rounds, or some things that are incendiary in nature. But we aren't going to stop any training. We still have to meet the training requirements and get those weapon systems qualified before they actually would deploy. So we're going to continue the training. Our fire department's been very active, not just with the recent one we heard so much about with the Midway fire, but we're experiencing fires on the installation about averaging every 10 days because of some of our training activities. Most of them you don't see unless you're in the southern part of the city or in Fountain, where you see some smoke coming up off the installation, but we're containing those. We are in a very dry season, or have been through. We started to get a little bit of moisture here lately, and that has helped. But our plan is to continue to do the training and continue to have the fire department and our cooperative mutual aids with other fire departments on standby to maintain any response necessary if we do have a wildfire.
Were those mitigation efforts in place prior to the Midway fire?
Oh, yes. We've had those mutual aids agreements. Some of the things, we've only had 2 fires in the past 15 years that ever crossed our boundary and got off the installation, the Midway being the second one. The other one was about 14 years ago. So there is some consideration to maybe actually doing more of a deliberate ditching fire break along that one area. So that's something we're considering to doing with some of the inherent engineer troops that may not be deploying. We're looking at that because there is some environmental concerns if we do that as well, and some drainage concerns. But looking at widening at least that buffer that was in that one area where the fire crossed. And we have done an analysis of all around our boundary of our main area here, main range area at Fort Carson. And most of it is already pretty well buffered. The area where the one fire crossed, and then as we go south is south of that one area where it crossed is already pretty well protected. We have a major landowner that we work with constantly, where we have already an environmental conservation agreement and a natural buffer. And as you come north of where the Midway fire, where it crossed the Fort Carson boundary, we don't do a lot of firing up north of that, so the risk is minimized. So we've done the analysis, and there is some places right along where the fire crossed that we would do some additional mitigation with our inherent engineer forces that we're looking at. So that's the one area.
I'd encourage you to reach out to our Public Works Director who directs those operations. I'll tell you, our resources are exhausted right now. We have dealt with fire after fire after fire this year, and we cannot afford to have another fire that comes as a result of live training at Fort Carson. We don't have the resources to do it. And so, to the degree that you can encourage leadership at Fort Carson to mitigate further, because it worries me when I hear that mitigation efforts were in place and we still had a 3,000-acre fire that destroyed 2 homes and countless other structures. To know that we're not doing above and beyond that to prevent that from happening in the future, it causes me a little bit of concern. So, boy, I got to tell you that I'm not overly pleased with what I just heard. Man, that scares me.
Well, as far as what other mitigation apart from stopping training, I think we have a good handle on what we're doing. We do maintain the relationship with all the local fire departments, and Mr. Easton, the Public Works Director for Colorado Springs, we've already had some contact with him about that. Another thing that is that we're working with the fire departments, because you mentioned resources, is when this occurs, which hasn't happened, like I said, but just twice in 15 years, there's a way that there's a claim process that you go through where the federal government actually reimburses local communities for the support that they provide to relieve some of that financial burden.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I think that's incredibly important. When I was talking about our resources being exhausted, it's not just financial, it's physical, it's emotional. I mean, we only have so many people that can fight fires, and they are, our public works director is, worked, I don't know, 20 days in a row because of fires, not all just related to Midway, but we have a limited number of people that can fight these things, and they're exhausted. They are.
And I appreciate Commissioner Waller's comments. And you actually discussed, at least briefly, one possible suggestion about widening a fire break. I mean, this may be obvious to everybody here at the table. Unless something big happens, like a really wet June, we are walking into probably the worst fire season in history in the Colorado Springs area. So for Fort Carson, we have a great relationship with Fort Carson, love the people there, but for Fort Carson and for everybody else, if there's something you can do it now. Do it now before we get into the summer where it's really going to be bad. We have multiple burned square miles of grasslands, and we're still in early April. This is not going to be a fun summer unless we have some kind of very wet June or something. So if there's something you can do it now, please. Thanks.
Anything else?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
On the transit quarry and Hitchrack Ranch, has the Fort Carson been a player in that at all?
We have had some representatives that have gone to some public meetings about the quarry that might be developed along 115, as well as the Cheyenne Air Force Station has been there as well, because it's in the affected area. As far as if it were developed impacting into the Fort Carson area, it was more about the where it would be located as traffic that would be turning on to 115, but it wouldn't have any negative impact to Fort Carson. But I think there is a lot of public concern just about having a quarry on the west side of 115. But we've been participating in the meetings.
So the traffic would be the major issue.
Yeah, the traffic for the entrance would be the major issue that we'd be looking at.
Anything else for Fort Carson? All right, thank you. Colonel Carley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Pat Carley from the Air Force Academy. Had two things to provide updates on for today, and happy to take any questions on those two items or anything else. The first one is the DoD Warrior Games. Department of Defense Warrior Games is coming to Colorado Springs, and specifically the Air Force Academy, on the 1st through the 9th of June. And looking at the DoD Warrior Games website, that's exactly 50 days, 22 hours, 9 minutes, and 40 seconds away. So everyone here at the table, I provided a one-page handout to you that lists the major events for those days from the 1st through the 9th. It is open to the general public. All the events except for the opening ceremony are free to the general public. Coming in through the north gate, all you need is a valid driver's license to come on to the Air Force Academy and experience these wonderful events the first part of June. There will be a major headliner at the concert on the 2nd of June. That's still, the details are still being finalized, so I'm not at liberty to share that yet, but I'm told just as of a few days ago, it's about ready to be finalized, but it'll be a big name concert person on Saturday the 2nd. Any questions on DoD Warrior Games? The second item I had was the USAFA Superintendent, Lieutenant General Severia, just on Friday, a few days ago, at the USAFA, the State of USAFA address, talked a little bit about the USAFA Visitor Center. So in case you didn't get that information, it's very good news. The Air Force has moved ahead with negotiations with a company called Blue and Silver, and part of the City for Champions initiative. The goal is to start construction next calendar year and to meet the timelines for the City of Champion funding. We are anticipating that the developer the total cost of the complex being over $30 million, with construction being complete prior to the December 2023 timeline for the City for Champions initiative. We're very excited about this. 2 hotels, visitor center opportunities, conference center, as well as a indoor parachute facility just at the north gate off of exit 156 off of I-25.
So great.
Yes, very good news, and General Silveria was very excited to be the one to share that with the community for the first time last Friday. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is great, and I think there's so much credit that goes to all of our community.
Yes.
Because initially when the answer was no, we went out to the ADC conference, we talked with Jennifer, for the MilCon stuff, and restarted that conversation. And, got in touch with the folks who were the decision makers down in San Antonio, had a lot of people in the room, a lot of you in the room at that point in time where we were saying, don't just say no, negotiate. And I'm glad that we finally have gotten to this point after a year and a half, so thanks for the leadership.
Thank you for your support, and Lieutenant General Silveria did mention the cooperation over the past few years, the city and the county and the state and many others to get where we are today. Thank you.
Love to hear it. Great. Yes, sir.
Athletic director's leaving within the next month as well.
So, yes, so 2 mornings ago, it was announced that Mr. Jim Knowlton will be heading to the University of California, Berkeley. He was offered a position there, and
West Point is going to Berkeley, that doesn't count.
That's right. That's right. He is I believe it's 26-year Army veteran, retired colonel, served as athletic director here at the Academy for the last 3 years. And Mr. Storm, I don't even think it'll be a month. I think it'll be less than that, is what I'm hearing, before he departs and arrives in California.
So they're going to have to have an acting.
There will be, the superintendent will announce an interim or an acting athletic director, and then a search committee for a permanent replacement. Yes, sir.
Stan?
Yes, thank you. Also appreciate everything the Academy is doing with regard to the Warrior Games. And maybe it's obvious, but I would encourage a broad marketing effort for the public agencies and any nonprofit that's interested in supporting it, because if we have a big public turnout at the Warrior Games, it just might come back. So having a lot of community support, as in actual participation to watch the events, that would be fantastic. So whatever anybody can do, I would encourage you to do that. Thanks.
So I do appreciate that comment, and I echo it. Right now, the next year's Warrior Games is already set for Tampa, but the subsequent Warrior Games have not. So I agree that any large showing in public support would definitely go a long way.
Great. Mayor?
Thank you. Colonel, any information on graduation will be close after our next meeting, and so what can you tell us?
Certainly. Graduation is Wednesday, the 24th of May. I hope I'm having the date right on my head. Okay, Wednesday, the 24th of May. The speaker is tentatively set for the Secretary of Defense, and the gates will open at 6 a.m. this year prior to the graduation ceremony at Falcon Stadium.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, Colonel Seth.
Okay, good morning. John Doucette, 21st Space Wing. Do have a few items for our update this morning. We recently completed our fiscal year 17 economic impact analysis. In short, our economic impact was down slightly from $1.27 billion to $1.24 billion. This was driven mostly by a reduction in contract services and construction, which dropped $50 million. However, our annual payroll increased by nearly $20 million. The project outside our west gate continues to progress. We really appreciate the support that we've gotten from the city on that in terms of deconfliction of traffic and the movement of equipment and material in that area. Everything's on track for that. We have had the stand-up of a few new units on Peterson. Colorado Air National Guard's 138th Space Control Squadron has stood up with approximately 100 personnel. We anticipate military construction project for that unit in the fiscal year 20 time frame. Additionally, the Cyber Operations Integrated Planning Element with 39 members has stood up at Headquarters Army Strategic Command at Building 2. And lastly, the 632nd Theater Aviation Battalion with 108 personnel has stood up, as well as UC-135s and 4 UC-135s and 4 C-21s are now on base. They're using some of the facilities that were freed up with the stand down of the 20th Airlift Squadron with their C-21s. We do have a very busy April planned with the Space Symposium and the arrival of numerous distinguished visitors for that event. And additionally, General Robinson's retirement has been announced. We don't have any additional details in terms of the change of command and when that will be taking place, but that will be coming up, and we'll be planning for that in the future. Lastly, a word of thanks to all of our local law enforcement and the support that they provided to the base during our recent security incidents. So, any questions?
Eddie, go ahead.
Did I hear you right? You said you had EC 135s?
No, sir. UC-35s.
Oh, UC 35s.
Yes, correct, sir.
Okay. That's a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah, electronic warfare, I guess not.
Right.
Okay, anything else? All right.
Could I correct the record? Mr. Mayor from Manitou Springs, the date of the graduation is Wednesday, the 23rd of May. I said Wednesday, the 24th. It is Wednesday, the 23rd of May is USAFA graduation. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. All right, very good. All right, Colonel
And
Moulton, welcome.
I think, just one thing for Peters. I think
okay,
it's
sure.
old hat, but we do have the MOU signed. And in case anybody hadn't heard that, so that's really exciting that start getting paid back some monies.
On PFOAs.
On the
issue.
PFOAs, yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Great, Colonel Moulton, welcome.
Morning, sir. I only have two things. I want to provide an update on our JFSCC and NSDC transition as those entities stand up, become fully operational. I think I briefed over 100 folks the last meeting. That hasn't changed. I mean, it's creeping up a little bit. We're trying to manage that effort, get folks over to Building 1 at Peterson so they find a place to stay. It's going to be mostly contractors. And the reason why that's important to us is how we get folks in and add during peak times to number of folks traveling back and forth to Schriever Air Force Base. So the number's about 123, I believe, is what I heard last. Still creeping up, but it's single-digit type stuff, and that's for this year. And the overall number is still in flux. I'm hearing everything from hundreds to thousands, so meaning hundreds to 1,000 or more. But I'll try to keep you informed. I think it's just important that we let you guys know the planning effort and let you know that we are trying to do this smartly so there's not a shock to the system as folks come in. On that note, good thing, we just got approved, a cyber initiative approved. I view this as a prototype, providing cyber protection for Schriever, Peterson, and Buckley. Is currently, at least the initial effort is going to be housed or out of Schriever. I don't have an exact number on that, so I do owe the board that number, but that is going to add to, during peak times, the number of folks traveling back and forth. Again, so the numbers I'm providing are actually contractors, civilians, and military, mostly contractors that are going to support these missions. That doesn't include families. Just to be clear on that. So I owe you that cyber initiative number. I'll talk to the team and see if I can get that. And if you guys need that earlier than the next meeting, just let me know and we'll get that to you. We're still on track for the MilCon that is supposed to house both the cyber initiative.
Military construction.
Military construction, yes, sir, on base. Sorry about that. Oh, no. For the. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Laughing about your terms, and some of us who aren't military trained.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just hopefully these guys know what I'm saying, but so I'm not alone here. No, yeah. But just when I start doing that, just let me know. But we're still on track for that. The last numbers I heard was breaking ground around 2020 to be complete 2022. I wouldn't be too optimistic on those numbers. These things tend to slip and go long.
Okay.
Only last thing I would say is that, again, I appreciate the law enforcement support, and specifically the agreement we have. We had an accident outside of base our fire department responded. It was right outside the base, and we were able to, I made the call to actually, divert traffic from base, from North Gate, because it was, you had to land a helicopter in right outside the base. So appreciate that support, and just anything dealing with anything from emergency response or anything else is good. I think I speak for everybody. It's good to have that communication, because we can support, at least with getting the word out with our folks on base. I know Schriever, we have like 8,000 folks on base, so we can divert traffic or help with anything. Those lines of communication are important, so we appreciate that.
How could you assess where we are on the U.S. or the Highway 94 coordination? Is it a conversation? What's that conversation look like, and how would you assess it?
So the conversation's been great, and the support has been great, and figuring out the plan on how we can get to where we think we need to be. I mean, that joint, I think it's been great, and I think I speak for my boss on that too. I think, what we owe you, and what I will try to bring, is an update on concrete numbers, as I move folks around on base and make room for new arrivals, and giving you an update on the military construction, so exactly the folks, hopefully exactly the folks that we're bringing into town on base and how we're doing that. So again, the idea is to make this transition as smoothly as possible, bring folks into Peterson so they can find a place to stay and get acclimated, so there's not a shock to the system, that we're not bringing 100 folks in within a couple of weeks. So we're trying to manage that process, and I'm not responding to requirements unless they're vetted through the command. So they report an increase to me that's been approved by the 4-star down to me, so we can operate, so we can plan to that. But we really appreciate just the efforts on just the discussion on 94. And from our perspective, as was mentioned before, there's a lot of unfunded requirements, and we're not trying to move up or down on that list. We're just trying to let you guys know where we are with these new missions. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of new missions coming to Schriever, or at least projected to come to Schriever. So we're trying to manage that process where we're not responding unless this has been approved at the right level. So when I come back to you and say, hey, we have new missions and this is what it looks like, that's something that you can, and we do have a couple of new missions, so I'm glad you brought that up. It's just been approved. I just don't have the numbers on the folks who are going to support those missions.
Great, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yep,
sir?
thank you. I just want to make sure we're happy with where things are going. Yes, sir.
As long as we're talking about military, the Military Affairs Council had their annual meeting last month at the World Doubletree, World Arena, and I had a chance to talk about PPACG and the MAC a little bit there, and Commissioner Lotzen and others were there as well. And talking about the graduation, if you go by the stadium, you'll see a great big pile of dirt, and because they started construction on the locker rooms and all that kind of neat.
That's right. That's close to a $6 million donor-funded project that is renovating the home football locker rooms there. And the anticipated completion date is right before the first home football game. We'll see how that goes. There are contingency plans in place to get the game will not be canceled.
It'll be.
Very excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. GP Medium tents in the parking lot, right?
Are these locker rooms going to guarantee a Commander-in-Chief trophy back at Air Force this year, given knowing the Army and Navy guys? Did you even know what it looked like? It's been so long?
All right, very good. Thank you, gentlemen. We want the Mobility Coordinating Committee any report. Gail or others from Mobility? No? All right, we'll move on to Transportation Advisory Committee. Brian Vitulli.
Good morning. Brian Vitulli, City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit, and Chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. The Item is in your packet. I can answer any questions if there are any.
Questions for Brian? Nope, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
Good. The Communication Advisory Committee, Jim Moore. Yep. There he is.
Jim Moore, First Vice Chair for the Community Advisory Committee. You do have our report. It was an interesting and extended discussion, and we loved having to do the waiting. So if there are any questions, otherwise that's all we need.
Questions for Jim?
Hopefully next month you will see Michelle Day up here, who
Okay.
is our 2018 chair. So
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Regional Advisory Council, David Betzler, is David still in the room?
Dave was here earlier. He did have to leave early. I told him I'd pass along if you have any questions. You've got his report.
Okay. No questions for RAC. Very good. We've gone through state monthly update. Statewide Transportation Advisory. Like to see how I just want to make a couple of comments. We had our, almost second to last meeting, I guess, at the old CDOT headquarters. One of the topics most interesting to me was the traffic demand model. CDOT asks the question, what causes traffic on our roads? If we can change the causes of why people drive, perhaps we can reduce the load and maybe even spend less on concrete. One of the findings was that one of the highest returns for the least amount spent for the highest return on getting people off the roads is increasing internet, broadband capability throughout the state. A dollar spent on broadband is one of the highest returns in keeping people able to work from home, so on. So the conversation was whether or not CDOT ought to be in the business of sharing what fiber they have around the state. Where that goes anywhere, it's now in conversation, probably has been for some time. Andy, any other points that stood out for you?
Well, not too much, no. I think you hit the high point on it. There was a lot of other stuff that's going on. I think that was the last meeting we were supposed to be in there. Oh, okay. But we were not in the normal conference room because the normal conference room was taken over by the team that was reacting to the CDOT hacking. So in case anybody didn't know, CDOT was hacked pretty severely about a month ago, and they've been a month recovery process, and they were still digging themselves out of the hole. So just reemphasizes the issue of today's wonderful environment of cybersecurity.
The SamSam ransomware, write me a check for $200,000 and the problem will go away.
On Bitcoin, right?
On Bitcoin, right? Yeah. They did not pay. But the recovery cost, I think now over $1 million for the recovery cost, and they're about at 80%. So long process. If you haven't looked at your own cybersecurity, I mean, now's the time. Andy, any comments?
No, that was sort of a wake-up call for us as well. We're definitely looking at our security, our IT system as well. And we'll talk more about that. There's some changes that we're going to make internally here over the next few months.
Maybe right on to the Executive Director's report then.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of items. You've got my report in here, but a couple of items that aren't in there. This is sort of late breaking, but tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, we're going to host the Colorado Association of Area Agencies on Aging. Their regular meeting, it's a C4A. We don't host it very often. I think it's been several years since they've been down here. I've got the agenda if anybody's interested in attending, but I do want to mention tomorrow at 11 in this room, they'll have a discussion of the 2018 state legislative session as it affects elder services and issues happening at the state level, in case you're interested. And then you could stick around for lunch if you or any other elected officials within your jurisdiction are interested in engaging. Good opportunity to find out what's happening as far as aging services in other parts of the state and with the state leadership. Second thing I want to mention is just last week we released our it's going to be our first of many transportation needs assessment report. It's on our website, just a fantastic product. It really describes the state of the region's transportation infrastructure, including our current and historical conditions of roads and bridges, safety, congestion, and also summarizes the results of the survey we did earlier this year, where we had, I think, roughly 700 responses to the survey for the 2045 plan. So just a great product. And I want to call out the efforts of Jennifer Valentine and Jenny Lyons in particular. It was a great team effort, but they really stepped up and did a fantastic job in pulling this together. And we're going to do more of this stuff. This is our first baseline, and we'll keep doing this going forward to look at the condition and performance of our transportation system. And finally, I want to mention, I think you're aware of this, but for public information, we've hired a new transportation director, and really thrilled about that. His name is John Leosados. He's going to join us on May 14th. He comes from Tucson, Arizona, where he's with the Pima Association of Governments, currently serving as the deputy director, acting deputy director, but he's been their transportation planning director since February 2011. He's been there for a little bit longer than that as well, serving in a variety of different leadership roles. I had the pleasure of working with John when I was there. We crossed paths for a couple of years, and I think he's just going to be a tremendous addition to our region and our transportation unit here in PPACG, and a great collaborator with our jurisdictions and with CDOT and many others. Nobody's happier about this than Ken Prather. I want to thank Ken because he's really stepped up over the past year, wearing multiple hats and leading the group in the meantime. So appreciate that, Ken, for all your efforts. But yeah, thank you much. That's all.
Great. Any other questions for Andy Gunning? No? Very good.
Could you email the information about the meeting that's here tomorrow? I know someone who might be interested. Thank you.
Okay. Member entity announcements, quickly around the table. We'll start with El Paso.
Just invite you to the El Paso County Citizens College. You can go online and find out about it. It's going to be Saturday, May 12th and Saturday, May 19th, 8:30 to 4:30. It's the time you get to go visit the coroner's office and get your get out of jail free card as you go in and out of the jail the same day.
Nope.
On the table? Park? Okay. Any carriers, anything from the city? Colorado Springs?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have, I'm sorry.
That's okay, appreciate it.
That was away.
It's just another, this is a question for Andy, and it's actually relating to the PPRTA meeting as opposed to our meeting here. But there is a calendar on the back of our packet, and it has the PPRTA meeting starting at 2 o'clock. And didn't we at the last meeting agree to go back to 1:30?
We did.
Yeah.
Good call. That's a 1:30 start.
Okay,
Thank you
so
for the correction.
just to clear the record then, for anybody here that's at PPRTA, ignore what the calendar says, it's 1:30.
Okay, thanks for pointing out. Okay. Anything else, anything from the city of Colorado Springs? Okay. Whittle Park, Fountain? Nope, very good. Nothing from Teller. You have our meeting schedule. Thank you very much for your time and attention this morning. It's 11:14. We're adjourned.
They do 480 rides over $1,000 per rider. You can hire how many taxi cabs?
That's a really good point. Or Ubers. I mean, you could bring a whole Uber fleet.
I've talked about this before. But I didn't have to back up.